It all started on a quiet afternoon when a rumor began to spread, one that no one really expected but somehow made perfect sense for Donald Trump. The former president, ever the showman, was planning something big, something daring, and of course a bit unconventional. Trump had decided that he was going to personally deliver a letter to none other than King Charles III. Yes, you read that correctly. Trump, after all the years of global politics, could not resist an opportunity to make a bold move. But what exactly could be in this letter that was so important, so personal, that it couldn't be sent through the usual diplomatic channels? Was it a message about global peace, a political endorsement, or something more? No one quite knew, and that only added to the mystery surrounding this unexpected move. Those closest to him speculated that it was a highly confidential communication, something that only Trump could deliver directly, something that no one else could handle. But as his plans unfolded, the purpose of the letter remained just as unclear as ever. The idea of sending a letter directly to King Charles might seem odd, even for someone as outspoken as Trump, but to him, it was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Ever since he left office, Trump had made it clear that he wasn't going to fade into the background like many former presidents do. He wanted to remain at the center of attention, constantly making headlines, always in the public eye. And this letter, whatever it contained, was his way of asserting himself in the global stage once again. Trump had always been known for his larger-than-life persona. He wasn't just a politician, he was a celebrity, a businessman, and someone who thrived on attention. But what he wanted from King Charles, and why he thought delivering a letter would be the right way to do it, was something that baffled almost everyone around him. Some of his closest aides and advisors were surprised when they heard about the plan. "Are you sure about this?" they asked, wondering why the former president would feel the need to personally deliver a letter to the British royal family. "Couldn't you just send it through the proper diplomatic channels like every other world leader does?" they suggested. But Trump wasn't interested in that. He wasn't interested in the traditional way of doing things. He wanted to make an impact, and the best way to do that, in his mind, was to break the norms. And so a secret mission was born. While many were puzzled by his decision, Trump wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. It was clear that he felt some kind of special connection to the royal family. Over the years, he had met with Queen Elizabeth II several times during his presidency. But now, with her passing and King Charles III taking the throne, Trump thought it was the right time to reach out again. He was, after all, someone who believed in taking action, direct action, the kind that left people talking for weeks. The more Trump thought about it, the more determined he became. He saw this as an opportunity to continue making waves on the world stage, to show that he was still relevant, still powerful, and still in control of the narrative. While the rest of the world moved on from his presidency, Trump was determined to keep people guessing. He wanted to be talked about, and nothing would accomplish that like a dramatic encounter with the royal family. But there was one problem. There was no official invitation. Trump wasn't visiting as part of any scheduled state visit, nor was there a meeting lined up with King Charles. This wasn't a carefully planned diplomatic mission with months of preparation. This was Trump, doing what he did best, throwing caution to the wind and jumping into the spotlight without a clear plan. As the days passed, the details of his visit began to take shape. It wasn't going to be a grand public affair like other visits to Buckingham Palace. There would be no press conferences, no crowds waiting outside for a glimpse of the former president. Instead, Trump was going to make this as personal as possible. He was going to arrive unannounced, walk up to the gates of Buckingham Palace and present the letter himself, bypassing all the traditional protocols. Those around him were torn between disbelief and amusement. They knew Trump was unpredictable, but this was something else. The palace had very strict security measures in place, and the idea of a former president just showing up at the gates of Buckingham Palace with a letter in hand seemed completely out of place. But that's what made it so Trump-like, so in line with his brand of boldness and defiance of convention. There were whispers of what the letter might contain. Some people thought it was a personal plea to King Charles, asking for some kind of favor or support for his future plans. Others wondered if it was a message about the monarchy itself, perhaps a suggestion of how the royal family should approach certain global issues. Whatever the contents were, it was clear that Trump had no intention of simply mailing it like everyone else would have done. Oh, this was going to be a dramatic delivery. Despite the secrecy, word started to leak out. Staff members at the palace, as well as a few journalists, began to catch wind of the visit. But no one could fully understand what Trump was up to. Everyone was asking, why would a former president of the United States, someone who had already had a complicated relationship with the British royal family, think that delivering a letter to King Charles in person was a good idea? But as odd as it sounded, there was a certain kind of logic to it. Trump had always prided himself on being unpredictable, on doing things his own way. He wasn't going to sit back and fade into the background like most former leaders. If anything, his desire to stay in the public eye only grew stronger after leaving office. This letter and the story that came with it would ensure he stayed on the front pages no matter what. And so, the plan was set in motion. As Trump prepared to make his way to London, the royal family remained unaware of the surprise that was about to unfold on their doorstep. But this wasn't just another visit. This was Trump's attempt to make history in a way only he could. And no matter what happened at the gates of Buckingham Palace, one thing was for certain: the world would be watching. In the days following Donald Trump's decision to deliver a letter to King Charles, the air around his plan grew thick with secrecy. Trump wasn't the type of person to do things the traditional way. He didn't want to go through the usual channels of diplomacy, sending the letter via a high-level ambassador, or even having his aides hand it over. No, Trump had other plans. His plan was more personal, more dramatic, and to some more unpredictable than anyone could have imagined. As soon as the idea started to take shape, a sense of excitement and tension began to fill the air. Trump wasn't just planning a simple visit to Buckingham Palace. He was going to make a statement. Every detail of his plan, however small, had to be perfect. His aides worked around the clock to keep everything under wraps, knowing full well that Trump thrived on being the center of attention. Every moment of this secret mission was designed to keep people guessing, to create buzz, and to ensure that no one saw it coming. The first hurdle was timing. When would be the right moment for Trump to show up at the gates of Buckingham Palace uninvited and unannounced? It couldn't be too early, or it would seem like a desperate plea for attention. It couldn't be too late either, or it might be overshadowed by other world events. But if he timed it just right, he could make sure that the world was watching when he arrived. Choosing the right time was important, but so was choosing the right company. Trump didn't want this to be a random visit, so his team selected only a few people to accompany him on his journey to London. These were trusted individuals who had been with him through thick and thin, and they understood the significance of what he was trying to do. However, even they weren't completely sure what to expect. Was Trump really serious about delivering this letter in person, or was this just another of his dramatic stunts meant to stir the pot? The closer the day of the visit came, the more questions began to pile up. Trump's team, some of whom were skeptical about the whole idea, began to ask, what was the letter actually about? What was in it that couldn't be communicated through the usual means? They began to wonder if they'd be walking into a situation where Trump would try to make a bigger political point, or if he really was trying to establish some kind of relationship with King Charles. But whatever the letter contained, one thing was clear: Trump wasn't interested in following the usual rules. Behind closed doors, as preparations for the visit continued, Trump's advisors had one major concern: security. Buckingham Palace was one of the most secure places in the world, with guards stationed at every entrance and a detailed protocol for every visitor. The idea of Trump showing up out of the blue and expecting to be let through the gates was, at best, a risky proposition. But for Trump, this was all part of the thrill. He wanted to push the boundaries, test the system, and see just how far he could go. In Trump's mind, the royal family was not above him. In fact, he'd spent years navigating global power dynamics, and he felt that no one, not even King Charles, was too big to handle. He had faced countless political leaders, and this encounter was no different. If he wanted to show up at Buckingham Palace uninvited, he would. If he wanted to hand-deliver a letter, then by all means he would. As the days passed, Trump and his team made their final preparations. The secrecy surrounding the visit reached new heights. No one outside of his inner circle knew the exact details of his plan. Even the people working at Buckingham Palace, who were supposed to be prepared for any visitor, had no idea that Trump would be arriving unannounced. Trump's aides had taken every precaution to keep the visit under wraps, hoping to surprise both the royal family and the world when the time came. Despite the secrecy, word began to spread. News outlets in the United States and the United Kingdom began to pick up on the buzz. Journalists whispered about a mysterious plan involving Trump and Buckingham Palace. Could it be true? Was he really going to show up with a letter for King Charles? Or was it just another one of those rumors that would fade away? The closer the date of the visit came, the more the media picked up on it. And while Trump's team worked hard to keep it all under wraps, there was a sense that the whole world was waiting for something big to happen. In the lead-up to the visit, Trump made sure to keep the mystery alive. He didn't confirm or deny the rumors, and he certainly didn't offer any clues about what was in the letter. Instead, he played along, letting the speculation run wild. Every time a journalist asked him about the visit, he smiled and dodged the question, adding fuel to the fire. Some speculated that the letter contained some sort of personal message from Trump to King Charles, something to help smooth over any rough patches in their relationship. Others wondered if it was a diplomatic move to show that Trump was still an important figure on the world stage, even though he was no longer president. Was it a request for a meeting with the king? Or was it a bold statement about Trump's continued influence in global politics? No one knew, and that was exactly what Trump wanted. The uncertainty surrounding the letter was part of the drama, part of the fun of the whole mission. As the days grew shorter and the time for Trump's visit neared, the tension became palpable. There were discussions about logistics. How would Trump even get to the gates of Buckingham Palace without being stopped? He wasn't just any visitor. He was the former president of the United States, and the royal guards were trained to handle far more high-profile people than him. But Trump wasn't worried about any of that. In fact, he was convinced that he could walk right up to the gates, deliver the letter, and make his exit without anyone stopping him. There was something undeniably thrilling about the whole situation. Trump, after all, was known for defying the odds, for doing what others thought was impossible. And this mission was no different. He wasn't going to let anyone tell him that it couldn't be done, and he certainly wasn't going to let some royal guard stop him from delivering his letter to King Charles. In the end, it all came down to one thing: timing. Trump needed to strike at the right moment, when everyone would be caught off guard. If he showed up at the gates of Buckingham Palace unannounced, and if he made his delivery in front of the cameras, the world would be watching. The plan was set, and the clock was ticking. And so, with the mystery of the letter still hanging in the air, Trump prepared for his visit to London. No one knew what the letter said. No one knew how it would be received, but everyone knew that Trump was ready to make history. The real question was, would his mission succeed, or would the royal guards stop him at the gate? The day had finally arrived. The air was thick with anticipation, not just in the streets of London, but all around the world. Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, was on his way to Buckingham Palace, and the mystery surrounding his visit had grown into a global spectacle. No one knew for sure what would happen, but everyone was watching closely. Was this going to be another one of Trump's grand gestures, or was there something deeper behind his actions? Trump's motorcade made its way through the busy streets of London, his usual entourage in tow. But this wasn't just any regular visit. This wasn't a state visit or a scheduled meeting with royal officials. This was something entirely different. The former president, dressed in his signature suit, was about to do something that few, if any, had ever imagined: try to deliver a personal letter to King Charles III himself. There was no grand reception, no diplomatic meetings. Just Trump, his letter, and the imposing gates of Buckingham Palace standing between him and his destination. As the motorcade neared Buckingham Palace, Trump could already feel the excitement building. He had prepared for this moment for days, even weeks, and now he was ready. His aides, ever the cautious ones, kept telling him that there were strict protocols at the palace. "You need clearance," they reminded him. "You can't just walk up to the gates and expect to be let in." But Trump wasn't concerned. He had always been one to challenge the system, to do things his own way, and today would be no different. The car slowed as it reached the palace gates, and Trump's team began to look out the windows, taking in the sight of the historic landmark. Buckingham Palace, the home of the British royal family, stood tall and majestic, its ornate architecture towering over the city. The royal guards were stationed at their posts, standing tall in their red uniforms and bearskin hats as always, looking like statues in front of the grand gates. Trump, still confident and determined, stepped out of the vehicle, his eyes scanning the area. He was here to make a statement, and nothing, not even the centuries-old traditions of the British monarchy, was going to stop him. His letter was tightly gripped in his hand, and his mind was focused on one thing: getting it into the hands of King Charles. But there was one small problem. The royal guards weren't going to make it easy for him. Standing in front of the gates, the guards remained stoic and unmoving, eyes trained on the visitors. Their job was to protect the palace, and they were well trained to handle any situation. No matter who you were, be it a world leader, a celebrity, or a common citizen, if you didn't have proper clearance, you weren't getting through. Simple as that. Trump, however, was undeterred. He marched toward the gates with his letter still in hand, confident that he could bypass any protocol. After all, he had been a world leader, and he was used to walking into places where others would be turned away. He approached one of the royal guards, who stood with his arms at his sides, his gaze unwavering. "I have a letter for the king," Trump said, his tone firm but friendly. "I'd like to hand it to him personally." The guard didn't flinch. He didn't say a word. He simply looked at Trump and then back at the gates, silently signaling that this was not how things were done. Trump didn't seem to notice the guard's silent refusal. He stood there for a moment, waiting for the response he had expected to hear. The royal staff would allow him to enter, or at least make an exception for someone of his status. But nothing happened. The guard remained as still as a statue, his expression unreadable. Realizing that his usual approach wasn't working, Trump raised his voice slightly. "I'm Donald Trump. I'm here to deliver a letter to King Charles." "You can't stop me," he said, trying to assert himself. After all, he had a reputation for getting things done his way, no matter the situation. But the royal guard wasn't impressed. He remained firm, showing no signs of recognition, nor did he acknowledge Trump's status. His job was simple: ensure the safety and security of the royal family. Nothing could interfere with that. Trump took a step closer to the gate, trying to get his point across. "You must understand I have important business with the king," he insisted. Still, the guard didn't budge. His face was blank, his posture unmoving. It was as though he was simply following orders, and those orders were clear. No one gets in without clearance. The standoff began to attract attention. Tourists who had gathered nearby, unaware of what was unfolding, began to watch the unusual scene. Some of them whispered to one another, wondering what was going on. Was this some kind of stunt? Was it really Donald Trump trying to deliver a letter to King Charles? Or was it all just a publicity trick? Trump's entourage stood off to the side, uncertain about what was happening. His aides, who had initially been reluctant about the whole plan, now seemed more nervous than ever. They watched as their boss stood at the gates, trying to negotiate with a guard who wasn't interested in anything he had to say. After a few moments of awkward silence, Trump turned to his team, his face now showing a hint of frustration. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Why isn't anyone letting me through?" His tone wasn't one of anger, but of disbelief. After all, in his mind, he had always been able to talk his way into any room. But this time, the rules were different. One of his aides stepped forward and whispered something in his ear. "Sir, it seems the guard isn't authorized to let anyone in without official clearance. We'll have to go through the proper channels," he said, trying to sound reassuring. Trump paused for a moment, staring at the gate, still holding the letter. He had never been one to give up easily. He thought about pushing the matter further, trying to convince the guard to let him through. But something about the situation felt different now. There were no cameras flashing, no crowds cheering him on. There was only this one, unyielding guard standing in front of him. Finally, after a few more tense moments, Trump reluctantly lowered his hand, the letter still clutched tightly in his fingers. He turned around and walked back to his motorcade, his mind racing. This hadn't gone according to plan. He had expected a grand entrance, a dramatic moment where he handed the letter to King Charles personally. But instead, he had been stopped at the gate like any other visitor. The guard had done his job well, and Trump, for once, had been forced to accept that some rules could not be bent, even for someone as famous as him. As he got back into the car, the excitement of the moment began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of defeat. His letter, once a symbol of his boldness, now seemed like a forgotten piece of paper, its significance fading as the moment slipped away.